Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily News for Tuesday, February 8th. We begin tonight's cast at the busiest international commercial land border crossing in North America. As of this afternoon, there was limited traffic crossing the Ambassador Bridge into Detroit from Windsor, Ontario. Yesterday, a demonstration against COVID-19 measures blocked travel in both directions. As of this afternoon, the bridge remains closed to traffic heading into Canada. The company that owns it wants officials to take prompt action to resolve the situation quickly. Meanwhile, traffic is moving slowly through the Coutts border crossing in southern Alberta after a similar protest. Turning to Ottawa now, where a Liberal member of Parliament is calling out his own government for what he says is its divisive management of the COVID-19 pandemic. Joel Lightbound told reporters today that federal COVID-19 measures, such as vaccine mandates for travelers and civil servants, need to be re-evaluated, and that the public needs a clear roadmap for when restrictions will be fully lifted. Mr. Lightbound represents the Louis Herbert riding in Quebec City. Meanwhile, a new poll suggests almost two-thirds of Canadians oppose the Ottawa protest against COVID-19 measures. A poll by Leger shows more than 4 in 10 say they strongly consider the demonstration a selfish display. But almost 30% of Canadians surveyed disagreed with that characterization of the demonstration, which has seen hundreds of large trucks create gridlock and incessant noise in the national capital. Andrew Enns, the executive vice president of Leger, says the survey highlights the extent of divisions within Canada, which suggests that the protesters might have tapped into broader concerns than just the grievances of a small minority. 2 provinces have announced the beginning of the end of pandemic restrictions. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is lifting the COVID-19 vaccine passport program on Monday. He says it has created 2 classes of citizens in the province. The indoor mask mandate is being dropped at the end of this month. Quebec Premier François Legault announced this afternoon that most COVID-19 restrictions will be lifted across his province by March 14th, except for mask mandates and the vaccine passport system. Back in Ottawa, the government warns Canadians against traveling to Ukraine as tensions continue to rise near the country's borders. It also says any Canadians currently in the country should leave due to Russian threats and the risk of war. Tensions continue to escalate between Russia and the West over the deployment of 100,000 Russian troops on Ukraine's border. Talks between the U.S., NATO, and other Canadian allies and Russia have so far proven unsuccessful, leading to fears of a new war in Europe. Well, for the first time, there are official feminine equivalents for the French versions of all military ranks in the Canadian Armed Forces. Major General Lise Bourgon pushed for last week's change as acting chief of military personnel. Ms. Bourgon, who has served in the military for 34 years, says having to use a masculine term to represent herself meant she felt like she didn't fit in. Some troubling news on the East Coast. RCMP in Nova Scotia are confirming that envelopes sent to 3 constituency offices of Nova Scotia MPs contained a chemical irritant. But it's not clear what the substance was that caused one staffer at an office in Barrington to have trouble breathing and develop skin and eye irritations. Similar envelopes sent to offices in Bridgewater and Yarmouth weren't opened. However, a person in the Yarmouth office developed a minor skin irritation. The housing affordability crisis in Ontario has experts calling on the provincial government to quickly and aggressively build more homes. A housing affordability task force convened last year by the provincial government released a report with 55 recommendations. They are aimed at allowing more people in Ontario to find and afford a home. The experts say the government should set a goal of building 1.5 million homes in 10 years. Average house prices in many regions have increased by 30% or more in just a year. Statistics Canada says the country posted a trade surplus of $6.6 billion in 2021. This is its first annual surplus since 2014 and the largest since 2008. But it says the country ended the year with a merchandise trade deficit of $137 million, the first monthly deficit since May. Time for an update on Team Canada, which downed the U.S. in Olympics women's hockey 4-2. They now advance to the quarterfinals. Brianne Jenner scored twice. Jamie Lee Rattray also scored for the Canadians, who topped Pool A at 4-0. Canada will face the third seed and the United States the second seed from Pool B in the quarterfinals. We'll be right back. As of early this afternoon, there was limited traffic crossing the Ambassador Bridge into Detroit, Michigan from Windsor, Ontario. Yesterday, a demonstration against COVID-19 measures blocked travel in both directions. The bridge remains closed to traffic heading into Canada, and the company that owns it wants officials to make prompt action to resolve the situation quickly. As of this morning, traffic was flowing slowly through the Coutts border crossing in southern Alberta. With us now to talk about the disruption at the Ambassador Bridge and what it means for the economy is Mr. Rakesh Naidu, President and CEO of the Windsor-Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima. Thanks for having me here.
So what are the most recent updates on the situation at the Windsor-Detroit border right now?
Yeah, well, we're still experiencing disruption. Sometime back, one lane was open for traffic going towards US. But more recently, CBS has announced that they're temporarily closing down the bridge, which means there is no traffic flowing this way, though the tunnel is open, and I believe traffic is being diverted to the Sarnia border as of now.
And what sort of impact will this have on your members in particular, sir?
Well, tremendous. This is a very important border crossing for Windsor-Essex region, but I would say for Ontario and for Canada, every day there is almost 300 million plus worth of goods that crosses that particular bridge. The goods that are brought in are goods which are required for many different sectors. There is, manufacturing parts, components that go into several automotive plants that several tens of thousands are employed in. There is perishable goods that cross the border. There is goods that a lot of small businesses rely on. So it's a very important border crossing, and any disruption in the border crossing can have a significant impact, especially for a lot of businesses that have just-in-time manufacturing, which requires them, or which basically what they do is they run with very low inventory, and when you have such a low inventory, any disruption can be very significant.
And as you're saying, this is one of the most busiest border crossings in North America. So what kind of disruption would this have on citizens and consumers in Windsor and even across Canada if this continues?
Well, it'll come back and bite all of us. As I mentioned that goods, many different kind of goods cross the border, whether it is automotive components, whether it's perishable goods, food items, groceries, you name it. There's so much that crosses the border on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, that if there's a disruption, at some point of time, it's going to, hit us. There will be empty shelves potentially at the grocery stores. There'll be cost increases. We're experiencing a 30-year high inflation as it is. Part of it is because of supply chain disruption. And what this is doing is really increasing the supply chain disruption, and that will add to the cost. So eventually, all of us will be paying for it, no matter which side we are on, all of us will be impacted by it.
Wow, sounds like quite a significant impact, sir. So what kind of steps are you calling for from the federal and provincial governments to tackle this?
Well, first of all, I think a border crossing is so important, so vital for the economy of both countries. I think it needs to be free. For a free and fair trade to happen, the barriers should be completely removed. The trade should flow completely unhindered. So we are calling for a very timely, immediate action so that the border can be opened up and the goods can flow freely. We also urging everyone, both sides, to sit down, have a conversation, and find a resolution. And we would like that to happen at the earliest. This blockage is hurting us. It's a crisis situation. Even if, an hour or 2 hour goes by when the border is closed, it starts impacting businesses, especially in the Windsor-Essex region and those regions that have similar supply chain and makeup of industry. And this has been going on for much longer. So we're really expecting both sides to come up sit down and come up with a resolution at the earliest.
And have you heard back from any of these authorities from both the U.S. or Canada in terms of your calls to action?
Well, what I can share is that there's growing concern on both sides. We are in constant touch with several businesses on both the Canadian side and the U.S. side. As of just about 15 or 20 minutes back, there is at least 70 plus organizations within Canada and US that have voiced or they've expressed their dissatisfaction at the situation and that are urging immediate steps. These are large organizations and associations that represent several thousands of businesses in Canada and US.
A new survey paints a troubling picture of mental health in Ontario. It suggests more people in the province are accessing mental health support than at any other time during the pandemic. The Canadian Mental Health Association poll indicates 24% of respondents have sought help for mental health challenges. This was compared to 17% last winter and 9% almost 2 years ago. Camille Quenneville, the association's CEO, says the survey results are concerning as they indicate the mental health of those living in the province is not improving. And Ms. Quenneville joins us now to tell us more on Forum Daily. Ma'am, welcome.
Thank you.
So what are the main takeaways from this recent study, ma'am?
We have learned on the positive side that people are comfortable seeking out support if they feel they need it, which is always a good thing. On the flip side, however, is the concern that we may not have enough capacity in the system to be able to accommodate the figures that you described, which is the highest number of people that we've ever had reaching out during the pandemic. So we learned that. We also learned that there is an increased use of alcohol, which has been consistent through the pandemic, increased use of cannabis, which has also been consistent. Those numbers are not dropping, which has, of course, not only mental health, but also physical health concerns attached to it. So overall, it's fair to say that we're at a point in time, 2 years into the pandemic, where I think we have good reason to be concerned about the mental health of Ontarians.
Some very concerning statistics there, ma'am. So from your research, what are the reasons behind this rise in accessing mental health support?
Well, I think in part, some of the reasons that folks are reaching out is they are finding themselves struggling with stress and anxiety and depression. Some are struggling with loneliness and trying to cope with what has been, we can all agree, 2 very difficult years. And that's overall, as I said, a really positive thing that people feel compelled that they can reach out and try to seek the support that they need. The key, of course, is ensuring that they get the right support and get the kind of support that will help them with the right tools to be able to carry on and improve their mental health.
And you earlier said that we are seeing some capacity issues in mental health support. So tell us a little bit more about the current state of mental health support in Ontario, ma'am.
Well, as we've heard, the hospital sector, understandably, is struggling with capacity because not only are they nurses and others becoming ill with COVID themselves, but also they have burnout, and they've really had to dig very deep through 2 years of working extremely hard under extremely difficult circumstances. The same really is true in many ways in our sector, in the community-based sector, where staff have burnout. They've been called on to work extremely hard and as well in difficult circumstances. So a lot of concern about having fewer staff to provide more service to people. So that is something that we have been keeping our eye on and continue to be worried about.
So what steps need to be taken to improve this sector, ma'am?
Well, one step would be to think about the kind of people that are attracted to work in community-based mental health and addiction services and ensuring that we are keeping the fantastic staff that we have. And in doing so, we would hope the government might reconsider Bill 124, which of course puts a cap on salaries. It's particularly onerous for us because we typically will lose staff to other sectors that are higher paying. So there is that impact which we continue to be concerned about and raise with government. And overall, it's an understanding that the mental health sector needs its own mental health supports from time to time. And this would be one of those times. So Canada Life had a recent survey that suggested nurses have the highest rate of burnout, but mental health has the second highest. So, we're right up there, and our concern about ensuring that we have the very best staff available to support all Ontarians is something we've been promoting with government.
All right, ma'am, just about 45 seconds left here, but for our Ontario viewers watching this right now, what are some resources currently available for them to immediately use for their mental health?
Well, I would highly recommend Bounce Back, which is a fantastic program, cognitive behavioral therapy that you can access over the phone. The province of Ontario has funded structured psychotherapy, and this program is part of that. It's free to all Ontarians 15 years and older. You can access it through bouncebackontario.ca. So I would highly encourage that as an early program that people can get. As well, there are branches, CMHA branches across Ontario. You can access those. And Connex Ontario, which provides lists of all the providers that are accessible to any Ontarian looking for services in their community.
There seem to have been some positive developments following marathon talks between French President Emmanuel Macron and Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday. Mr. Macron says Mr. Putin told him he would not further escalate the Ukraine crisis. President Macron's remarks on a visit to Kyiv came after the Kremlin denied reports that he and President Putin struck a deal on de-escalating the crisis. Mr. Macron met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as fears of a Russian invasion continue to mount. Moscow insists that it has no plans to attack Ukraine. A new report calls for big changes to help the U.S. fight the festering opioid epidemic. The bipartisan report from a congressional commission says the U.S. needs cabinet-level leadership and a new multi-pronged strategy to counter the deadly issue. It calls opioids one of the most pressing challenges in America's national security, law enforcement, and public health. The COVID-19 pandemic has overshadowed the American opioid epidemic for the last 2 years, but recent news that overdose deaths surpassed 100,000 in just 1 year caught the public's attention. Beijing Olympic organizers say there are 32 athletes currently in isolation facilities. This comes after they tested positive for the coronavirus, and they are spending an average of 7 days in isolation. They say 50 athletes have been discharged from quarantine, and that the vast majority of athletes in isolation are well and do not require any medical treatment. The disclosure came after complaints by athletes and teams about inedible food, dirty rooms, a lack of training equipment, and internet access. All right, turning to Australia now, where political leaders have apologized to staffers who have endured decades of bullying, harassment, and sexual assault inside the Parliamentary House and other government offices. The presiding officers of the House of Representatives and Senate delivered the apology on Tuesday. It was on behalf of a cross-section of parties as part of a statement acknowledging a toxic workplace culture. That culture was exposed by Australian Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins's investigation. Meanwhile, in Europe, the European Union is announcing a $48 billion plan to become a major semiconductor producer. There has been a supply chain bottleneck for semiconductors over the past year. The EU is trying to curb its dependency on Asian markets for the component that powers everything from cars to game consoles. Some European consumers have had to wait nearly a year to get a car because of a lack of spare parts. Well, this comes as one of the big three automakers is putting the brakes on production this week in the U.S. and Mexico. Some employees at 6 Ford assembly plants may get an unplanned vacation this week due to the ongoing computer chip shortage. The company says it is suspending production this week at 4 assembly plants in Kansas City, in Wayne, Michigan, Chicago, and a facility in Mexico. This as well as a truck assembly plant in Dearborn, Michigan, and a transit production facility in Kansas City will run just one shift. The United Nations World Food Programme has grim news for the Horn of Africa region. Drought conditions have left an estimated 13 million people facing severe hunger. People in a region, including Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya, face the driest conditions recorded since 1981, according to the agency on Tuesday. It is calling for immediate assistance to avert a major humanitarian crisis. Drought conditions are affecting pastoral and farming communities across parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. A Spanish retiree is campaigning to keep in-person customer services at bank branches. Carlos San Juan from Valencia, a 78-year-old retired doctor, says he felt left out by the shift to online banking. On Tuesday, Dr. San Juan handed a petition with over 610,000 signatures to the Secretary of State for the Treasury. Spain's Minister for Digital Transformation stood alongside Dr. San Juan and promised effective measures by the end of the month to address the problem. And a Regina man and his team have taken 14th place out of 299 teams at the International Barbecue Cookers Association competition hosted in San Antonio, Texas. Rob Reinhardt's passion for barbecuing began 20 years ago when he started cooking on his backyard grills and smokers. He loved it so much, he began doing it for friends and parties. And by 2008, he had started a part-time catering business, which he now does full-time. The competition lasted several days, and on one of them, the Saskatchewan team created a Wagyu ribeye steak topped with a garlic sauce and snow crab. Yummy. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news. Take care, Canada.